The purpose of this hearing is to examine the assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump that took place July 13th. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. On July 13th, 2024, our nation came within an inch of an unmitigated tragedy and crisis. In Butler, Pennsylvania, a 20-year-old gunman mounted a building in plain view of former President Donald J. Trump's campaign rally, took aim, and fired multiple rounds. At exactly the right moment, however, President Trump turned his head to read a chart so that a bullet which would have pierced his skull instead grazed his ear. 3 others sitting behind President Trump on the stage experienced a different fate. 50-year-old Corey Comparator, a father and former fire chief, was struck and killed. As one outlet recently reported, this brave and loving man, quote, spent his final moments diving down in front of his family, protecting them from the gunfire that rang out, end quote. He is survived by his wife and 2 daughters. 2 others, 57-year-old David Dutch and 74-year-old James Copenhaver, were seriously injured. I'd like to pause for a moment of silence in remembrance of Corey and in prayer for the recovery of David and James. Thank you, everyone. This failed attempt on President Trump's life demands urgent and comprehensive congressional oversight. We must understand how it happened to ensure that changes are made so this never happens again. That was a scene last Saturday where thousands of Americans were exercising their constitutional rights until they were viciously attacked. Yet what we saw after those shots rang out should also encourage everyone. We saw a leader under fire, rising up to show the attacker had failed. We saw brave Secret Service agents who put their bodies in harm's way. And we see Americans across this nation refuse to let this thwart their participation in our democratic process. At the same time, however, we also witnessed a massive security failure by the Secret Service and the Department of Homeland Security. The closest someone has been to taking the life of a president or presidential candidate since Ronald Reagan was shot in 1981, more than 40 years ago. We must be committed in our determination to ensure that this never happens again. That is why the House Committee on Homeland Security is demanding full transparency and accountability. That's why we made a trip to Butler, Pennsylvania yesterday to see the site for ourselves. I'm grateful to the ranking member and the 11 other members who were able to come yesterday. And I want to share with the American people some of what we saw yesterday. I, for one, was struck by how close the unsecured building from which Thomas Crooks took his shot was to the stage where President Trump was standing. What we saw yesterday only raises more questions about how this roof was unsecured. And after several of our committee members climbed on the roof, let me tell you, any excuse about the roof being too steep to post a counter sniper team up there is pure nonsense. Protecting the President of the United States and presidential nominees is the Secret Service's mission. There can be no room for mistakes. Unfortunately, that was not the case here. In order to prevent a repeat of this, we must first thoroughly gather and assess the facts. And that's why we're here today. Most importantly, to obtain answers for the American people from officials in the best position to provide those answers. And like tens of millions of Americans, our list of questions is extensive. Why was the rooftop which the shooter fired multiple rounds not secured? Who made the decision not to post a counter sniper personnel on the roof or in a place better to cover the roof? Were warnings from private citizens in attendance about a shooter on top of the building heard by federal law enforcement? And if so, why was nothing done to respond? How did the shooter access the rooftop despite reported federal and local law enforcement presence in and around the building? Were there communication breakdowns that prevented law enforcement officials from effectively communicating with each other in response to alerts and threats? The shooter was spotted and designated as a suspicious person prior to President Trump taking the stage. Why wasn't President Trump moved to a secure location until the Secret Service could investigate? The shooter visited the rally site multiple times before the actual rally. Reports indicate he even flew a drone on a reconnaissance trip to the rally site on the day of the attack. Why wasn't the site secure? Following the rally, the Secret Service said that reports President Trump's security detail requested additional security resources were false. However, then backtracked and told the Washington Post that the Secret Service had learned new information, indicating the Secret Service headquarters may have in fact denied some requests. Why and when were those requests denied? These are just some of the most pressing questions we have and expected to hear answers from Secretary Mayorkas and Director Wray and Director Cheadle. We also expect to hear answers and questions about the shooter's motivation and what the FBI has found in its investigation, including information collected from the shooter's various devices. Unfortunately and unacceptably, they have refused to appear before the committee today. Director Cheadle testified yesterday before another committee, but many questions remain. Yesterday, she provided wholly unacceptable responses to members of the House Oversight Committee and completely failed to address the lack of confidence both sides of the aisle have in her leadership of the Secret Service. Her appearing before one committee yesterday also does not absolve her of her responsibility before this committee. In any case, make no mistake, we will continue to push for answers. While these federal officials refused to testify today, we're grateful for the opportunity to speak with law enforcement members about the events of that tragic day. Their testimony will be critical to putting together this complicated puzzle, understanding coordination efforts, and getting to the truth about what happened. Before I conclude, however, I have to urge the ranking member to reconsider his legislation that was clearly intended to strip Secret Service protection from President Trump. While I understand the legislation would not have applied in this instance, it was clear to everyone that it was directed toward former president. We all introduced messaging bills. This one should be withdrawn. Today's hearing is critical so we can ensure that our children and grandchildren will grow up in a free nation where every American can participate in the democratic process. I hope every member will join me in getting to the bottom of what happened so that it doesn't happen again.